Our crappy culture. All right, I want to go back to this idea of what the media and is doing to us and how we've responded to the media with Donald Trump and how that gets some of us, I think most of us, into a bit of a bind. I want to start, the poet W.H. Auden, one of the last great poets. I've always thought he was a very good poet, but he was actually borderline great, Auden. He wrote a famous poem on called September 1st, 1939, that's the day that Germany invaded Poland and World War II began. And he was just so depressed. I'm sure you all know, like the way I felt when I was reading about this Las Vegas shooting today. Let me just read you a little bit of it. He starts out by saying, "I sit in one of the dives on 52nd Street, uncertain and afraid as the clever hopes expire of a low, dishonest decade. Waves of anger and fear circulate over the bright and darkened lands of the earth, obsessing our private lives. The unmentionable odor of death offends the September night." And that's a very famous line, that it was a low, dishonest decade. And now he starts to talk about all the things that have unraveled and war has come. And one of the final stanzas, he says something that people like me, I know, feel all the time. All the people who care about what they're doing and are speaking and have an audience. He says, "All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie." All right. And he goes on, and he says, "There's no such thing as the state. No one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizens or the police. We must love one another or die." And this is another of the most famous lines in the poem. We must love one another or die. And the story goes that Auden later wanted to change that line, because people don't know this about poets, but poets are usually the most realistic people in the world. They want to describe everything very exactly. And if you look at old-fashioned romantic poetry and then look up the science of what they're describing, they got it exactly right. And Auden wanted to change this line because he said, it doesn't matter whether we love one another, we die anyway. But of course, as so often with poets, his muse was smarter than he was. When he said we must love one another or die, after the war, Auden returned to his Catholic roots and became a believer again, I believe. I can't speak for his inner life, but he did return to his Catholic roots. And I think that the story of the Gospels tells, the story of the Bible as read by Christians tells us that, in fact, we must love one another or die. You know, when Adam and Eve were in the garden, God said to them, "Don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or thou shalt surely die." And the devil, or the serpent, came to Eve and said, "Thou shalt not surely die," which is, Charlton Heston used to read that line. He used to say it was one of his favorite lines in the Bible because it was so insinuating, that thou shalt not surely die. And a lot of people say, well, Eve eats the apple and she doesn't die. But in fact, that's not the case. In the Gospels, in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "This is eternal life, that they know you," he's speaking to God, "that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent." So in that sense, right, in the sense that life, true life, eternal life, is to know God, when they disobeyed God, when they turned away from God, they did die. They did surely die, okay? And so it is true that we must love one another or die, and I know how hard this gets. As I said before, the left has been hammering us now for 50 years. And it's one thing it is one thing for me. You know, I have a voice. You know, I can write things, people read them, I can say things, people listen to them. But most of us in this country, you know, what Knowles was saying about Facebook is true. Social media has given us a voice, but it's not like the voice of the media. The mainstream media is like the German tanks, you know, it just rolls over everything. It rolls over everything. And you turn on the TV and the comedians are making fun of you. You turn on the news and they are slanting the news away from your point of view. You turn on to watch a stupid award show. All you want to do is see the women in their pretty dresses and, you know, the good-looking actors. That's all you want to do. And they stand up there with their statuettes that they're feeding to one another, patting each other on the back for their $1 million, you know, hijinks, and then looking in the camera and telling you you're an idiot, you know, and it's offensive. And they don't understand how offensive it is. And they don't understand that a lot of the reason that Donald Trump was elected president, even though he's so rude and sometimes bullying, is because he's so rude and sometimes bullying, and that's the people talking back to George Clooney, talking back to Meryl Streep, talking back to Stephen Colbert and all these people who spend every single day hammering the left. You don't like it, guys? That's what it feels like. That's what the Stephen Colbert show feels like to people on the right. You don't like the stuff Donald Trump says? Well, that's what it feels like. And you know, if you wanted to see, I just brought in a couple of incredible examples of the bubble people are living in. Bret Stephens, who is a guy I don't always agree with, but I respect him. He's independent. He's smart. He's now works for the New York Times, and he's he hates Donald Trump so much that he was alienated from the Republican Party. He wrote an article called The Dying Art of Disagreement, and it was on the Chuck Todd show. And Chuck Todd says, how long has this been going on? And Bret Stephens talks about how we lost the art of disagreement.
In the last 20 years, one of the things that has happened is that too easily we inhabit our kind of social media filter bubbles in which we only hear and have reflected the views that we agree with to begin with. And the second thing is that too much of television has become a kind of rage factory for one side or the other, when there's never any actual meeting of minds. You simply caricature what the other side has to say or think, you know, unpatriotic liberals or Neanderthal conservatives, and then you attack the straw man. So I think this has been going on for a long time. I think one thing, though, is that part of the problem is on campuses. I don't think we are teaching students as well as we ought the arts of persuasion and of learning how to handle a contrary point of view.
Okay, so now Chuck Todd offers his theory. I mean, this is an amazing moment. Chuck Todd now offers his theory on how we lost the art of disagreement. This is cut number 8.
Well, let me ask you this. I think a lot of people would point to cable television as well, talk radio as well. I'll give you one example, and some may fire at me for this, but I don't think it was healthy that we had a cable news channel run by a former political operative.
Right, so the problem for Chuck Todd in Chuck Todd's life is the cable news and talk radio, all conservative. And when he says a political operative running a cable news channel, he's talking about Roger Ailes at Fox, right? That's who he's talking about. A political operative, George Stephanopoulos, is the chief anchor on ABC News, one of the biggest news networks in the country. What is he talking about? The kind of blindness. You know, I was talking about Bob Schieffer before. That same thing, that kind of blindness that they're in this bubble. The bubble is made of iron. So what happens? So we send Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, he says stuff that drives me crazy sometimes. He's so rude. He's so bullying and all this stuff. But I understand. I do get it. It is, they're talking back to the people. And Trump, by the way, loves it. Trump, it was said to tell his aides to say, just tell him that crazy guy in the White House is going to do something really bad. Like he said, he said Rex Tillerson is off negotiating with the North Koreans, and Trump says, hey, he's wasting his time. They're not going to listen to this. And everybody's going like, oh my God, the president, Well, Trump does this on purpose. This is part of his negotiating technique and part of the reason the people who love him love him. The problem is, we have to fight back. We have to strike back against this incredible monolith of the news and the entertainment media and the academies. We have to make our voices heard, and Trump is one of the only ways we can do it. But if everybody is stooping to everybody else's level, we just keep going down and down and down. When do we stop hating one another? The fact is, I truly believe that 70% of this country could get in a room together and talk face to face and start to make changes, start to go forward. Here's the thing. That is not going to happen on the news. That is not going to be, I love Glenn Beck. He's a great guy. He's a terrific commentator, a brilliant man. But Glenn Beck going to the New York Times and talking to the New York Times isn't going to solve anything, not because of them, not because Beck isn't a good guy, but because the people who are opposed to one another look at that and think, oh, Beck is selling us out, or the New York Times, why are they talking to him? Or, Beck just wants the New York Times to whatever they say. The conversation is not going to be, you are not going to be led back to a unified America. I'm not going to do it. Rush Limbaugh is not going to do it. The New York Times is not going to do it. Chuck Todd's not going to do it. This is going to happen. This is on you. It's on you guys. It's going to happen in your dorm rooms. It's going to happen in your dorm rooms when you don't tell the other guy to shut up, or when you do invite him in to talk. It's going to happen in emails. It's going to happen in coffee shops. It's going to happen in town halls and in churches where people who disagree speak to one another in a civilized way. You know, the other day, I have a friend, an email friend, Obiano Uju Ikiocha. I just call her Uju because that's her nickname, and I cannot pronounce her name. And she has written a wonderful book, and I'll bring her on to talk about it, a book about what's happening in Africa, and she is a cultural conservative and a Catholic, a devout Catholic. And I wanted to praise the book and put a blurb on the book because I think everybody should read it. It's called Target Africa. It hasn't come out yet, but like I said, we'll have her on when it does. But I wrote her a note saying, you know, I just want you to know I'm not as culturally conservative as you. And I think the book is wonderful, and here's the reason I think the book is wonderful. But these are places where I disagree. And she wrote me back this wonderful note saying, oh, you know, I listen to your show every day. I know you don't agree with me on all this stuff. That has nothing to do with it. We have to have these discussions and all this stuff. That is where this is going to begin. It is not going to be, it's going to begin with wonderful people like Uju, you know, who will talk to people who, even when they disagree. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to be Trump. It's not going to be the news media. We cannot sit around and wait for them. We have to start talking to one another because this moment has to pass. It has to pass. We have to get to a point where the gears of government can move. We have to get to the point where we're not hating one another. We have to get to the point where we can all agree that a guy who goes and opens fire on a concert is evil no matter what he thinks. I don't care if he says he's anti-fascist. I don't care if he says he's anti-black. I don't care if he says he's anti-white. I don't care if he says he's pro-Muslim. He's evil. And that, once we can decide what the evil is and that you and I are not evil, then you and I can start to talk to each other. We will continue to talk to each other tomorrow. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is the Andrew Klavan Show. Be here because this is all the Daily Wire has left.